Hey everyone, Phreak here. Welcome to my patch 9.9 rundown for League of Legends. I'm going to give a quick apology if some of this information is wrong. I did not have time to go through and make sure all the numbers are correct, but I did this pretty recently, so they shouldn't be anything out of date, but there's a greater chance than normal that I got some of these things wrong. I didn't have time to double check, so hopefully we're okay here. 9.9 is a meaningless patch for pro play. We'll be on at least 9.10, probably 9.11 by the time we hit the summer split, but it's still a cool patch. We're all playing on it in solo queue. Most people will say that this is a solo queue based patch rundown anyway. I don't agree, but that's fine. Anyway, let's go talk about this patch. I think it's really cool, it's really big, and it should be fun overall. So, up first, a minor rework to Aatrox. There's a lot changing around. So the base health regen is getting tanked. The passive bonus auto attack no longer reduces healing and shielding, but instead heals him based on the bonus damage. The bonus damage is going down from 816 to instead 5 to 10, but the cooldown is going lower, and the cooldown refund is instead of 2 seconds per ability cast and per champion hit with the, I believe, sweet spot of Darkened Blade, it's instead 2 per ability or attack on champions or large monsters and champion hit with the sweet spot of Darkened Blade. Okay, so basically you are losing your W, E, and R, reducing the cast cooldown of the passive, but gaining landing an auto attack on monsters. And landing a basic attack on champions. So they have definitely re-added auto attacks into the Aatrox pattern. Getting this in is a big deal. Keep in mind as well that this damage is not as bad as halved. It does more damage than half and heals him. So the total health difference of this passive is strictly higher. The cooldown, the base cooldown is strictly lower. The actual cooldown refresh mechanic is debatable. The champ hit with sweet spot is obviously the exact same thing, but auto-attacking a monster is new. And assuming your Q casts actually hit champions, so it gets gray area eventually, but I'm going to overall say this is definitely a buff to Aatrox. I think each one of these sets of lines is a buff to Aatrox, right? The overall cooldown change is a buff to Aatrox. The overall damage output is a buff to Aatrox. The thing he loses is the reducing on healing and shielding. Honestly, I think that's fine. He will miss it in certain matchups, but overall, still, on a whole, that part is a buff to the champion. Now, keep in mind, his health regen is still down. Might not be made up for by this. We'll see. Okay. Where are my numbers? So here's the base health regen. You can see it is down by 60 health per minute. Right? 1 health per second, 6 health per minute. That's, of course, what 5 health per 5 is going to be. So unless this deals 60 health per minute, and then still makes up for the fact that his bonus damage is lower, that's what you're looking at here, okay? All right, so next up is the Q. The Q now starts its cooldown timer instead of at the very beginning of casting the spell, but after the last Q you cast. So if you only ever press Q once, the cooldown is the same. If you press the cooldown 2 or 3 times, it will be longer potentially. Of course, the base cooldown is 2 to 6 seconds shorter, but again, that cooldown refresh is different. And the damage is up 0 to 20. So here's the numbers on that. Oh, here's the auto attack damage, by the way. It is up 17 to about 120 damage based on character level. And this is using Aatrox health as the base. And Aatrox is slightly low base health for a melee champion, so this is slightly deflated, but whatever. It's close enough for reality. And that so you're doing. Actually, I'm trolling. I'm actually trolling because I rolled in all this damage together. I wasn't thinking about how much healing he would get. I just didn't include that, so I don't have that perfectly there. This is going to be close to accurate because the damage went roughly to half, so the amount lost is roughly the amount gained. That's not quite true. You actually get more than the number difference here, but this is an example of me not doing everything and double checking what was important, so that's my bad. The differences here, again, going to be slightly higher, so it's like 25-ish to like, I don't know, 100-ish, actually more like 200-ish healing gained from this. So, you know, it's pretty good. but not going to make it for the healing at the beginning of the game. That combined with the health regen, that will be a nerf. Anyway, the cooldown difference, which I did do some numbers on. So assuming that he only ever presses Q once, that it's just Q1, they press the button and receive the cooldown. I'm actually already trolling with this, by the way, because the base cooldown is 16 to 14. For some reason, no. Yeah, it's after the Q cast window expires, which is 2 seconds. There, you get a 2-second window to choose to recast or not. And then when that window expires, you add 2 seconds. So I was right. This is actually the right numbers. If you only ever press Q1 and do nothing else, you have a shorter cooldown of the ability. Okay, cool. That's in there. Bam, we're done. If you take as long as possible to spam your abilities out and wait the full window, wait the full window, wait the full window. Also, by the way, I want to point out that because the recast window on Q is only 1 second, if you press Q1 and AFK, or you mash Q every second and get it out really, really quickly, this is the same cooldown difference. So if you Q, like you're basically Riven, or if you Q and AFK, this is the same data table. And it is a lower cooldown. You have more abilities out there, which also, by the way, means you can refresh your passive more quickly. That's important as well. That if you mash that crap, it is a faster cooldown by 4 seconds. If you take as long as possible, though, and you wait the full 2 seconds, wait the full 2 seconds, wait the full 2 seconds, this is your cooling difference instead. You've got a 6-second difference here because I think it's 4 seconds between casts instead of 1, something like that. So, yeah, you get a fairly long. You get a cooldown increase if you wait between your Qs. You get a cooldown buff if you don't wait between your Qs. I want to correct one more thing. Again, this is my fault for not double checking stuff the day of. The cooldown wait window, I believe, is 4 seconds, which means that this is the Q mash data table. If you Q once in AFK, it is, I believe, 2 seconds longer than this, and so it's slightly weaker in the early game. Not that Q1 and AFK is a common play style, but there you go. All right, apologies for getting stuff wrong on Aatrox. It'll get better from here. Aatrox is one of the most complicated ones. The W slow is flattened. The W cooldown incentive, though, is increased. Meanwhile, the E loses its attack damage growth incentive. You still get the healing buff, and you still get the cooldown buff. But hey, you know, there is theoretically a reason to max W second only because of the cooldown increase. I don't think you will. I really don't think you will. But theoretically, this is an incentive to rank up the ability. Here is the Q damage before we go into that. Up by 0 to 20 based on rank, not a very big deal. This, of course, counts only his base AD. Of course, in the real world, he'll get like a Doran's Blade or something. Or, you know, he's going to get that Black Cleaver, maybe a Death Stance in there. So, okay, it's different in the real world, but there you go. Here's the W cooldown and slow. This assumes you're maxing W second, which is probably wrong, but I did it for fun. If you max it last, like, it goes to yellow, right? It starts red up here, and it goes down, and it lands there. You just ignore this green part in the middle. And the slow goes there, and then because the rank up incentive doesn't matter for the slow, it's the same table regardless. And the damage, it's yellow all the time, right? Like, if you still max it third, who cares? Those are easy numbers to look at. But if you do choose to max it second, because you care about the cooldown incentive enough, you actually get wins by level 12. That's actually pretty quick on. I mean, you have to get 4 points before it's better. Don't get me wrong. But hey, you know, you get to enjoy that level 13 to 17 section where you've got more Ws. You're not getting more E's, so it's pretty bad. But again, you are losing an E level incentive and gaining. I would argue this is more important than that. You're gaining a W level incentive. So there is push towards, hey, actually, we should be ranking W. There is push towards it. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a push towards it. There's your table, right? Obviously, the slow is a lot better for most of the game. Even if you are maxing it last, still, you were maxing it last before, so the W is definitely more powerful as a slow tool. It is just as powerful as a damage tool, just the cooldown is worse. It's debatable whether, like, strictly this change is a buff. It's probably not. The cooldown going from 26 to 18 is a pretty big deal, but this slow matters quite a bit. It's tough. I don't know. It's close. Who cares? Ultimately, these are very big changes to the champion. This is a very big nerf. This is overall a buff to the champion. This is, I would say, power neutral to a slight buff. This is power neutral, roughly. This is obviously a strict nerf. And then we get to the next change. Okay. You must now get a kill or assist during World Ender to revive. Doing so extends your ult duration by a further 5 seconds, which refreshes its movement speed and gives you the revive for an even longer window. No longer clears temporary buffs. The movement speed is just simply a big percentage change. And keep in mind the movement speed, right, is for 1 second and then out of combat instead of just a percentage buff decaying over the duration. Now keep in mind rank 3, or 100% decaying down to 0 is a roughly 50% movement speed buff for the course of the ability, which is worth about 150 move speed overall. Actually more than that, more like 100 and, I don't know, call it 180 move speed overall. A bit more than that in the real world, but hey, it's decently close. 240 out of combat is worse than 100% decaying in combat. 120 to 60, it's the same thing here, right? So there is a very substantial movement speed in fight buff by doing this. This is a really big deal. This move speed is strictly better. Of course, having to get the takedown to get the revive is a very big deal. It's going to be difficult. Getting increased healing during World Ender is pretty sick because, of course, that multiplies his new passive. It multiplies things like Death Stance. It multiplies his E. He can drain tank some fools during this. That's a pretty big deal. The heal during the revive is, it's about as good. So, you know, it's in the middle of the two, so who knows? It's fine. This is solid. The fact that the duration keeps going up is a really big deal because they're like, well, we want to focus you down, but we don't want to because you'll revive. But if you kill us, you get more move speed, and oh my gosh, we're getting checkmated by this champion being powerful. This is cool. And it's really a very snowbally ability, right? It doesn't do much if you're behind because you press R and still die anyway. But at least it gives you move speed, though, which is cool. And it gives you some healing, so you can still fight. But yeah, cooldown timer starts on cast because you can keep, extending it. The cooldown, in fact, is getting better, and the cooldown timer is getting better, so that's actually pretty sick. Cast time is lower. Okay, you're slow during the revive, but honestly, there's so many cool things going on. Even if it's not a power-up change, even if the actual power of the champion is not higher because the revive requires a killer assist. Oh, sorry, not that one, but this one. Even if this makes it a nerf overall, it's a way cooler ability. And I want to live in this Aatrox world as opposed to a different Aatrox world. So there will be follow-up buffs or nerfs in 9.10 or 9.11. Overall, cooler champion. Excited about these changes. Okay, it's been 12 minutes. We've gotten through one champion. Blitzcrank has a reworked R updated VFX. That's pretty sick. Mana barrier is now max instead of current mana. If you are at 60% of max mana, it is the exact same. So that's the breakpoint. Updates to things. It no longer does the random damage. Instead, it deals 1 per punch. Generally speaking, at least when your W is active, you will get more damage out of this. It is half the damage, but a better ratio, so that's kind of cool. Half the damage, but triggers on things you care about more, generally speaking. So I think that's cool. I think that's positive. Cleaned up updates. Okay, great. Cool stuff to Blitzcrank. Happy to see it. Moving on. Next up is Recon, who is getting a base stat pass that makes him a melee champion. So the health is up by 60, armor is up by 3, which is, in my example world, between light and medium melee. Attack damage down to something more reasonable, and his magic resist is a normal melee champion. For some reason, Recon is out of order, and I did everything in order. So we'll get to Recon's table later on. You know what? We can do it here. We're going to scroll down past everything. Wait, did I miss it? Oh, no, I'm just actually trolling. There's Recon. So, of course, Recon cannot leave base without getting his passive shield on, and so I'm including his passive shield as part of his champion's base health, and it's up 12 to only 3%. Kind of the shield, Recon has absurdly high HP. Actually, even with before the buff, actually. He's still scaled up to respectable melee champion health. This is respectable melee champion health. This is really reasonable, 21-something. 513 is really, really low in the early game, and that's why this got buffed by 60 to 573. Like, this is now real melee champion health, right? That's actually passable. And, of course, it scales up to really, really, really high numbers. I don't know if it needed to scale as hard as it did. Like, they could have cut the health scaling by 2, but who cares? That would be a fiddly change. The armor up by 3 puts him here, which is still on the very high end of armor overall. His armor growth is still exceptional. So that's a quite high number, but overall, plus 3 armor, plus 60 health, and overall he is 14 to 4% more durable against physical damage. We go to the MR side of things, and the fact that he has 2 more base MR and 0.75 more MR growth is a really substantial gain to his magic damage durability. He is 14 troughs in the middle, and then because base stat scaling like ramps, it's non-linear. It's back to 14% more durable. So this finally gets rid of the whole, hey, Recon is bad into Syndra or Syndra is good into Recon because you just kill Recon. He is now a real melee champion because he's essentially a melee champion, right? Like, he deserves to have real MR growth the way that I think Thresh deserves to have real MR growth. They're melee champions. They frontline. That's how they do their jobs. Okay, Thresh gets to play for lanterns and stuff. Like, he's not quite as melee, but I think this is a good change. It is, again, a 4 to 14% durability increase in the early game and a 14% durability increase in the early game. This is, of course, a very similar multiplication to his Regen, because Regen mostly cares about your resistances, because you take damage through resists, then Regen true damage, essentially. Very, very big buffs there. The attack damage growth, no one cares about, so there you go. Grand Entrance, slightly faster. That's cool. Quickness, you can no longer cast W or Flash in the first half second of of the quickness. That's a really big change, of course. That is a really, really large change because that is ultimately what is keeping this champion as a pro-only champion. If R Flash W is a thing, Recon is going to be a 47% win rate solo queue champion who is popular in pro. Because reliable engage that people can't react to is really good against pros because they can react to things, right? It's the reason why Malphite is good in bronze and bad in pro, is the reason that Recon is good in pro and has to be nerfed everywhere else. Because you can react to Malphite, you can't react to Recon. So they're basically giving him, without making the W so astronomically slow that you can always dodge everything, they're making the W somewhat reliable. This is fairly difficult to dodge. And making the R no longer R Flash. I think for the health of League of Legends, this is a good change. I think they have consistently shown that if Riot reduces some of the pro-facing mechanics and buffs base stats, you get champions in healthy spots. Ornn is like 49% win rate and not oppressive because they buffed the crap out of his base stats. They kept his R cooldown long. They made his W not a shield and unstoppable and the most damage in the game. Now he's a well-rounded tank where all the abilities have a reason to level them, and he's not invincible in the laning phase, and they got him to a spot where he's okay in solo queue and pro. That was a win. Next change, and so I like this change. It might require some follow-up tuning, but I would be shocked, honestly shocked, if Recon's win rate went down this patch. Or at least if it went down long-term. Like, there's a bunch of strat tracking sites that will show you win rate by day. And if you go into, like, day 7 of the patch, Recon will have a higher win rate. I would be shocked if that wasn't true. Next up is Soraka, who got big changes as well. All right, so Wish got a tooltip update, whatever. Equinox is stronger at rank 1. The cooldown is down by 4 seconds. The mana cost is the same. The damage is the same. At rank 5, it's same cooldown, higher mana cost, and far lower damage. They are trying to kill Emax Soraka, but actually buff rank 1E. Of course, Emax Soraka was the uncounterable 230 damage poke, where if you stayed, you also got rooted in place. It silenced you, so you couldn't trade back anyway. I am glad they are nerfing Emax Soraka. That stuff was BS. Update to the W. Great. Here's the real change. Massive update to Starcall. Okay, let's unpack this. The cooldown has a level incentive. Okay, so you have a reason to rank up Q. The self-heal goes from 56 to 88 to 60 to 140. Wow. That's a really substantial self-heal increase. The ally heal goes from 42 to 110 to 60 to 140. Same as this thing. Okay, so a buff to the healing if you could give it on yourself by landing the ability, or to giving it to your teammate. Okay. Heal over time is actually front-loaded because with the cooldown getting lower and you buying things like Ardent Sensor and Redemption and like upgraded coin, you're going to have CDR. So you will overwrite your dot a lot. So that's cool. It's front loaded. Okay. The damage incentive, though, is lowered by 10 to 30. The healing is up by, generally speaking, more than that. Generally speaking, more than that. So provided you are getting the healing at all, provided you care about the healing at all, the health difference on the ability is better. Right? The rank up incentive is, of course, quite positive. The rank up incentive there is quite positive. And the haste has a rank up incentive. Instead of rejuvenation being 10% only when running away, it is 14 to 30 decaying for, I assume, the entire duration, which, by the way, is now 5 seconds. 5 seconds. Same 5 seconds. Wow. That is a substantial set of buffs. You have to land the Q, and to be fair, Q max was not the build, it was E max. But wow, this is an incentive. Here is, it should be down here. Spoilers, there's other buffs in this patch. Here is the rank up. I'm going to assume very heavily you're going to max Q first now. And I'm going to just assume for old time's sake that you're going to max Q just to make comparisons easier, because I think you're definitely doing it now. So yeah, the damage is down by 10 to 30. The cooldown is better at ranks 4 and 5. That'll take some time to get to, don't get me wrong. Here is the self-heal, 7 to 60% better. The ally heal, 40 to 25% better. The movement speed buff, basically what I'm doing here is I'm saying, well, running away from champions is only on half the time. So we're going to pretend this is not a 10%, but a global 5% movement speed buff. And the decaying haste is not 14% all the time. It's 40% decaying, so it's roughly 7%. And 30 is roughly 15%. So I'm basically having these in the back end numbers and saying how fast do champions actually move? Well, they're moving 4 to 18% faster. That's pretty good. And keep in mind, it's both you and your teammate moving 4 to 18% faster. And it's you and your teammate healing 25-ish or something percent more. These are very, very substantial healing buffs. They're very substantial haste buffs. These are meaningful. Oh, also this should have been red than green, but YOLO. Yeah. These are buffs to Soraka, provided you are willing to max Q, which is a good thing. It's her high agency tool. It's the one that actually has gameplay around it instead of just like Wing your teammate and being AFK the whole time, pressing E at max range and not getting traded on. Like, this is the right shape for Soraka, at least. Like, design-wise, these are good changes. Numbers-wise, there's going to be a large percentage of players who don't read patch notes and don't max Q first. That's going to be an oops. It's probably Q the W max now, because E's level incentive is just not really worth it anymore, I'm going to guess. The damage upgrade is just not really there anymore. Provided you max your abilities correctly. I mean, losing E max is certainly meaningful, don't get me wrong. Losing Emax does matter, but this is more than enough compensation in my opinion. Long term, this is a buff for Soraka, and if it's not, there'll be a patch. Also, keep in mind Soraka is like a 54% win rate champion. So like if she's a 52% win rate champion and is Q max, I think it's also fine. So we'll see. Next up, substantial updates to Tahm Kench. Once again, they're doing the better for solo queue change of let's make him a real tank. So he has really high move speed now. This is actually 345 is on the high end. I would put 340 as like an average champion. 345 makes him fast. 60 health, slightly going down with rank. This would be 34 health overall, lost. Bonus damage on his passive, higher at early levels, worse at later levels. Let's look at these numbers now. Tahm Kench health and auto attack / Q damage. Here is his health before and after. 11 to 1% more health. Skill up 20 to 100. That is a lot. Wow, what a tanky boy. Okay. Here's his auto attack damage on a single stack. Of course, if you have 2 stacks and 3 stacks, it does slightly more, because duh. Right, but the numbers are just shoved further apart. But you can see that because of his higher base health as well, he consistently deals more damage. So for the first 12 levels of the game, his auto attacks deal more damage. And that's not debatable. His health is strictly higher, and his passive damage doesn't get worse till 13. So this is a buff, this is a buff, and this is a buff. Okay? The passive change is a buff. Especially for support who doesn't get to level 13 almost ever. The Q damage, of course, is very similar. Of course, Q has a high base damage, so you get less percentage gains, but still a buff. Okay, cool. That's there. That's nice. Tongue Lash's slow duration is getting better. You already max it first, but the cooldown incentive is getting higher. So I guess a less oppressive early lane, but from levels, 7 onwards, the cooldown is the same. But keep in mind, the range is better, the slow is better, the slow duration is better. So it is a higher impact single ability, but you are less likely to get a stun. Now, you weren't getting stuns very often in the early game with Tahm Kench. You did get it sometimes, don't get me wrong, it did matter some. That's going to be less likely, but you have an increased range, heavier slow for more duration. You're going to make up a lot of ground with this. So as we go over here, of course, the cooldown is indeed weaker until level 7. But here is the slow percentage old, the slow percentage new. The duration, of course, much higher. And I double-checked this math, and this surprised me, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. Your target is consistently about 2/3 as fast, or rather, only covers 2/3 of the distance over 2 seconds. The slow duration, right, is flat at 2%. But the slow percentage going from 70 to 70, but 2% instead of, or 2 instead of 1.5 seconds, right? You're slowing for another, 1/3 as long. They move about 2/3 as far, a bit less than that. For some reason, this still feels wrong in my head, but my math didn't tell me it was wrong. I don't know, maybe I'm still an idiot. Of course, still more meaningful in the early game. Yeah. Ultimately, I guess that the increased duration doesn't mean as much when the slow isn't so intense. Either way, your target moves about 2/3 as far over 2 seconds. Like, that's what it comes down to. Your target moves 2/3 as far. Which, hey, that's pretty meaningful. You're cutting 1/3 off of their movement for 2 seconds with this buff. That sounds good. This cooldown change obviously hurts him a little bit, but with the increased range, like, he's better at setting up picks, right? That 1 Q is going to mean more. This feels pretty positive. Now here comes the nerfs, because of course this is a buff, this is a buff, this is, I would say, overall a buff with this range increase and everything else, probably a buff. Here is the nerf, okay? He is now slowed when saving an allied champion. You can still pull them out of Malzahar. You can save them from Vi. You can, keep the Rengar from killing them. You can give your team time to do stuff. But, of course, yes, it is weaker in the regards of, well, you can't run them to safety. You get now not only half your cooldown, but half your mana back when devouring an enemy champion, so they're increasing the incentive for offensive action. The cost indeed is 50% when devouring an enemy. To be fair, not enemy minion, but enemy champion. So devouring and regurgitating minions is weaker in this regard. Cooldown removed one of the level incentives. Damage incentive went down a little bit, both in minion damage and champion damage. Enemy champion damage went from 20 to 36 to 100 to 240, plus a much lower target percentage. Same AP ratio, though, in case you built that. Let's look about that damage. Let's look at that damage now. And I assumed, well, of course, the cooldown is flat no matter what, but of course, you used to max it second. Well, first 11 levels, it's a buff to the cooldown. Okay, that's a slight buff, I would say. But the W damage, assuming you are maxing it last now, because you're definitely maxing this thing last now. Maybe Tahm Kench will still max it second, but I'm using support Tahm Kench as my example because support Tahm Kench is by far the more common role. The damage goes down very heavily. And at the trough, it's 30% of the damage output. This is how much damage the ability used to deal. It was a lot. Yes, it required you to get 3 passive stacks on, but it existed. Goes down by a lot here. Now it's this. Okay. Very meaningful damage cut, but keep in mind, support Tahm Kench is eating allies. Of course, that's still weaker because of the slow, but, is what it is. The last buff, though, is Thick Skin is now free. The percentage of gray health healing is up, and the So when I did this set of notes, by the way, it said you only gained X% of damage taken as gray health. If that's not true, and you always gained full gray health, but it simply was a 70 to 90% shield, then I did the math wrong. It is possible that I did the math very, very wrong because I misread the patch notes. Or these are miswritten and it wasn't that way. Somebody plays Tahm Kench, correct me in the comments. Did you only gain 70% of the damage taken as gray health? Or was your shield simply 70% of your gray health as a shield? The way to the math was pretending that you took percentage of damage taken as gray health. So, of course, the shield, old and new, right, instead of 70 to 90 is 80 to 100. That's at least going to be accurate regardless. So the shield is 14 to 11% stronger. Also, I'm assuming you're maxing it second because the level incentive is better. Instead of maxing it last, which you used to do because you cared about W's level incentive, aka cooldown, which is gone now. So you are substantially more shieldy, especially in the mid game, 43% at level 13. That's really, really big. But I assumed, maybe erroneously, that indeed the amount of gray health you gained also scaled on rank, and now that you maxed it second, you could gain up to 2.6x the healing. Now, keep in mind, some of this is still true, right? Because 15 to 35 became 20 to 40, and if you do indeed max it first, you are still getting that 15 to 40. But what I included here, and I somehow made these numbers go wrong because this doesn't make any sense at all, so I screwed this up slightly. Sorry about that, everyone. But I also assumed that this multiplied in, and this might have been wrong, and I apologize if that was the case. Either way, it is still substantial gains. Still substantial gains. A lot tankier from E, a lot tankier from base, okay, a little bit tankier from base stats. More damage from the passive in the Q. Less stuns in the early game, weaker W in the late game. R's range and cooldown have been changed as well. The range is weaker in the early game, stronger in the late game. Cooldown weaker at all points. Here is the R. It is a puddle jump in the early game, by the way. Low-level Tahm Kench ults do not do very much anymore. You lose a lot of your map mobility. And the cooldown is nerfed for a very, very long time. It's nerfed for the entire game. At level 16, Tahm Kench, the range is finally longer. This is an overall nerf for the ultimate. Of course it is. Getting level 16 doesn't happen in most games, especially not from support. Even in top lane, it's not always. And this is another change where it's like, hey, Tahm Kench is a 43% win rate support in solo queue. This champ is garbage in solo queue. Don't play Tahm Kench in my games. But the reason he's a top 3 pick in pro play is this ult is absurdly good for map mobility, and this W is absurdly good for saving your teammates when you're coordinated. And people in solo queue, not good at either of those things. Last time I played alongside a Tahm Kench support, they cast it literally 0 times. Literally none. Shouldn't have even ranked up the ultimate. Didn't ever cast it. Across the entire game. So for some people, this is not even a nerf in solo queue. These changes overall are a buff to Tahm Kench in solo queue. They are probably a nerf to Tahm Kench in pro play. And honestly, he needs both those things. All right, next up, we go back to alphabetical order. To the top with you. To the top with you. Up we go, up we go, up we go. I didn't write down the numbers for Akali. That's not terribly important. The cooldown is up by 4 to 0 seconds. And the duration is down by 1 second when breaking. Okay. Small number for Akali. Next up is Decimate's heal is up by about 1/4. 3 to 9% is 1/4 of the healing. The damage is up by a flat 10. Here's that. The healing is up 25%. Damage is up by 10 to 3% based on rank and based on level. And of course means less and less as he buys more attack damage items as well because it's a flat damage buff. Okay, great. Darius seems to be in a reasonably okay spot, to be honest, but he's going to gain some power here. And yeah, he'll be strong. He'll be definitely playable. Next up, buffs to Echo, 3 attack damage, and 0 to 20 mana off phase dive, which you typically maxed second. So I like the 3 AD, helps his jungle. Here's his base stats, actually pretty meaningful. His attack damage growth wasn't that high. 106 is fairly low, especially for a melee champion who auto-attacks, so that's kind of nice. This does buff Tank Echo slightly, who, of course, cared a lot about Sheen synergy, Triforce synergy, Iceborne Gauntlet synergy. I forget. Actually, if Lich Bane has an AD ratio on it as well as the AP ratio, I've forgotten. I think it had it at one point. I just don't remember anymore. But maybe. Either way, this helps wave clear, this helps last hitting, this helps jungling. This, of course, is nice because Echo actually does have very high mana growth. His actual mana regen growth is fairly low. He doesn't end at a great spot for regen. He actually could. He's actually like one class behind most mages. Not a huge deal, but that's like a thing in his base stats. Getting his E at a lower cost is kind of nice. Echo could overall use some slight buffs. I really like Echo. I'm bad at him. Overall, nice buffs. It's probably like 1% win rate. This is probably the same. Maybe a bit more, maybe 1.5. Nerfs to Hecarim, who definitely could, desire some nerfs after his most recent buffs. He's definitely in there in solo queue. He's definitely in there in pro play as a top laner and a jungler. Definitely seems strong. Small nerf to his Q. Small nerf to his E, which he max second. Here's the data table on this. This is assuming you got two caps. This is assuming you got 2 stacks onto Q. Of course, your first Q is the same damage in all cases. The second Q is in the middle here. It is an 8% damage nerf or a 4% damage nerf with only 1 stack, or again 0% with 0. E damage is on rank up, and yeah, pretty meaningful here. It is a base damage with a bonus AD ratio, so there is no inherent level scaling. Of course, you are going to go Warrior Triforce this champion. So, this damage goes up and the difference goes down as you build attack damage, but no duh. Overall, these are sizable nerfs. This will cut probably 2% win rate off this champion. Next up is Jarvan. Some more number cleanup. I love this, right? Health gets rounded down, mana gets rounded down, mana regen gets rounded down. And I think he's also, the designer is rounding based on power level. It's like, well, Jarvan is strong, so we can round down. Like, I agree, you can. What's nice is they are nerfing the W incentive on Golden Aegis. I do want to point out that, so this is actually brought up here. Okay, it's not right up there, but it was another potential talking point. Now, Jarvan is overall high win rate, so he does deserve strict nerfs. But I would say his pro presence relative to his win rate in solo queue is skewed towards pro. So if you're going to nerf Jarvan, I think nerfing Jarvan in pro or pro-facing nerfs is more meaningful. And so indeed, they're doing a nerf that affects pro more, as pros are more likely to max W second. I think that's reasonable. So they're lowering some of the level incentives off of Jarvan. Here is his base health, 0.2 to 0.1%, no one cares. Here's the base mana, 0.7 to 0.2%, no one cares. Here's the mana regen. Okay, 3.8 to 1.8%. That's, fairly meaningful. Okay, I'll give you that. 2 health, 2 mana per minute. Want to point out, though, by the way, this affects top Jarvan and almost not at all jungle Jarvan, because keep in mind, the jungle mana regen item that he will eventually buy refunds a flat mana per second based on missing mana. It is not an amplification of your mana regen. It is not an amplification of your mana pool. He gets blue buff on first clear, and he gets a talisman on second clear. Those are mana regens that are not affected by this. It basically does not affect jungle Jarvan in any way. And then here is the W on W with 5 targets. Now, of course, this means less and less and less if there are fewer targets. In fact, if there are 0 targets, the same ability. If there's 1 champion, it's some, right? But the nerf on rank 1 of the ability against 5 targets is 15 health. But of course, 15 health level 1 matters. It's 12% of the shielding. Overall, at its worst, assuming you in fact maxed it second, and bam, here was your big cut, you lost 30% of your overall shielding when there were 5 targets. And of course, as you level up and you gain more health, and the thing doesn't scale with anything but health, it's up to a 1/3 cut off the shield. So a maxed shield in a full team fight is 1/3 worse. That matters. But again, the jungle clear is unaffected because there are no nearby enemy champions. And in most of your gank scenarios, there is 1 or 2 champions against you. So this nerf of let's put it at level 5. This 20 shielding health nerf is a 5 shielding health per enemy champion nerf. It matters. It exists, but this 15% is 3%. It's a 3% nerf. Not nearly as meaningful. And of course, you look at if you max it last, where the, of course, level incentive doesn't exist for quite a lot longer, and instead of 70% weaker, it's 30% weaker, it's 18% weaker. And again, only if you're against 5 targets. In the real world, 18% is like, what, 3%? Again, in those kind of scenarios, almost 4%, whatever. Really not as big of a deal. So I'm choosing the loftiest numbers possible just to kind of explain them and show them off. But this shield is still reasonably good. It's still a big slow. It's fine. Equal number 1 second. Okay, cool. Overall, definitely enough for the champion. Definitely matters. This will lower his win rate by 1% or 2%, and will lower pro more. Kennen losing the resist during E instead gains them during R. I like this, actually. I'm glad. Now, if you did max it first, you had 50 by level 9. This 40 is at level 11. So, like, if you maxed it second, you would have it, rank 1, rank 2 at level 8, rank 3 at level 10, and then, levels 12 and 13 is 40 to 50. So, like, okay, if you're maxing it second, it's, like, about as good, and then it kind of bounces out by the end. If you max it last, it's just strictly better. And I actually do like the resist during R. You don't have to as heavily use Zhonya's. I mean, it's still only 20 to 60 armor and MR. It is not a lot. But, you buy a Proto Belt, which has health on it. You often could buy, like, a Doran's Blade, which has health on it. Maybe you go for, like, a Morellonomicon or Oblivion Orb or Liandry, stuff like that. So there are health bridges onto Kennen. This is nice. It slightly lowers your need to buy Zhonya's, but not by a ton. I think this is a good shape change, though. I think it's a positive. E as an escape tool is less good. I think it's a good thing. First Kinder Mark spawns at 315 when the Scuttle Crab spawn. We'll see that in a second. Lissandra getting some extra power because she definitely lost a lot of win rate. Her pro presence is like 11% or something. It's reasonable, but I think that's just kind of people are hanging on to the champion. She might not be that good anymore. But gaining pretty substantial 0 to 20 damage and 0.2 ability power ratio on the W. That's quite nice. It's 0 to 11%, but a 2/3 higher AP ratio is pretty meaningful. This is some pretty big increases in power for overall team fighting. Now, of course, this assumes you max it second. I think maxing it second could be worthwhile. I know E has a cooldown incentive. That's pretty meaningful as well, but maybe you choose to switch. You might choose to with this. This is a reasonable decision to make this happen. All right, next up is Maokai, gaining 5 to 25 damage on the Q. Same AP ratio, though. Here it is, 8 to 11%. Helps his trading. Max it first. Good stuff. We'll get to Manamune later. I don't know why it's out of order. I'm trolling. Next up is Morgana. Yeah, and this is minor, right? It's, I don't know, call it 1%. Yeah, honestly, like, trading really does matter. Like, I look back at the Nautilus games I've played so far this year, and the fact that he's able to actually trade pretty well with, like, the E and the crafting potion and everything else, like, really makes me able to like, lane pretty nicely. And I think Maokai's Q being good puts him in a pretty close scenario. 250 is a pretty solid base damage. This ratio is crap. This ratio is hot garbage for how much damage this has, so I think this could have been buffed, but whatever. I guess I don't want AP Maokai back. This helps with jungle clear, of course, as well. Yeah, this is at least 1%. This is pretty solid. Next up is Morgana, who's getting nerfs to just flat 3 seconds on the cooldown and a 10 to 50 off the shield strength. Pretty big hits to Black Shield. Of course, support Morgana is high win rate, high ban rate, high pick rate. Mid Morgana, super high win rate as well. Overall, definitely Morgana could use the nerfs, so here it is. And yeah, I mean, 13 or 20% on the cooldown here. I am choosing to believe you max it second because you're going to max Q first and then support max it second. That's your most common roll. You know, very similar cut here. Of course, it's exactly 1/7 off at all the times, so 14% off there. Yeah, this is really big. This is a good, you know, 1.5% at least off Morgana. So, you know, that's a pretty big deal. She will still be on the strong side, still be completely viable, still be completely playable, just a bit less OP. Next up, Rek'Sai, also getting rounded down. Same designer, 1.5 attack damage, 0.35 attack damage growth. That's Recon. We need Rek'Sai. Here we go. Yeah, so here's the attack damage before and after. It is a 2 to 6% cut right here. You can see 115 still a pretty reasonable attack damage here. That's reasonable for a diver. That seems okay. It's enough to matter. Q cooldown 11 to 7 becomes 12 to 10. That's your 9 to 43% cooldown bump. That's pretty big. This can mean quite a lot. I am not sure how often Rek'Sai gets multiple burrowed Qs off in fights. I don't track her jungle pattern to see if she burrows again for a second Q. I'm not really tracking what is it? Like what her team fight combat pattern is, where like is she getting a second burrowed Q off? Sometimes that can be true. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't think this is that big of a deal, but maybe it really is. Also, a nerf to Furious Bite by a flat 5 damage. Here you go. It's 9 to 5%. Not gigantic. Does exist, though. Yeah, okay. So, pretty large nerfs to Rek'Sai. Does need the nerfs. She's incredibly high win rate. Is one of the top 3 pro junglers. Can use the nerfs, and indeed is getting these. I think these will... she will stay above 50% win rate. Because she's high win rate jungler. Very, very powerful. Yeah. I guess reasonable. Jack in the Boxes now don't get screwed by Sweeper. Whew. That's a big deal. Even if not for power levels, for feels, it's a really big deal. This is going to mean a lot. Shaco stronger. Have fun, Shaco mates. Your champ's OP. Shen getting some attack speed growth and also getting a higher bonus health ratio on Shadow Dash. These are very, very small changes. I don't expect much, but here is Shen. So here's the attacks per second, old and new, right? 11% more attack speed multiplicatively than before, 18% or 70% additively, of course. That's pretty nice. But also, if you manage to get a Q through a champion, it gave you a bunch of bonus attack speed. So here is that difference with the Q involved. And it's still about a 9% attack speed increase by the end game. That's pretty solid. Yeah, I mean, level 9 is like a pretty solid time to like start trading with Tiamat, and it's like 4% more attack speed, 4% even with the other buff. This is solid. This is pretty reasonable. The Shadow Dash, of course, you're getting extra one quarter of the bonus health ratio. So if you bought 1,000 bonus health, you double the damage here. Okay, that's gonna take you a while, but cool. You get an extra 30 damage per 1,000 bonus HP. It exists in those cases, like a 10% damage bump, I think. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's not huge. This is the bigger one. Probably about 1%, I'm guessing, on that one. Next up, I buff to Silas W, an increase on the rank up by a simple 20%. There you go. Cool. Right now, W second versus E second is a fairly competitive level incentive. This pushes you towards W second, of course, which you might see as the build, which will keep them much less mobile. But you still have your choice between mobility and healing, which I think is reasonable. I don't think it tips the scale so much that you're like definitely not going to max E second anymore, but it's a possibility. Small buff to Silas does need the help. He's, of course, out of pro play, and he's weak in solo queue, so, you know, minor buffs here seems solid. Just love taps. Next up, pretty big front-loaded buff to Volibear. Normally he does max W first, mostly jungle increase, but a 5% per stack attack speed increase is a really, really big deal. So his attack speed under the W. Wait, did I do this wrong? 12 should become 27. Yeah, 5, yeah, 15. Okay, yeah, we're good here. And of course, he keeps the buff as a 5% at the last stack as well. It doesn't scale down with rank. It's simply a strict buff. So yeah, 5 to 50% more attack speed on W is really substantial. 13 to 7% overall attack speed. You don't typically buy things like Wit's End, though you can, of course, but like Cinder Hulk into, you know, Triforce or the Tiamat upgrades and whatnot is the more likely build, in my opinion. Yeah, okay, Triforce is attack speed, but still, you know what I mean. Yeah, this is really meaningful. This is a very substantial attack speed buff. This means a lot for his ability to duel. It means a lot for his ability to clear. Really, really big here. Probably, like, I'm going to say even like 2% win rate increase on this. This is a really big buff to Volibear. Hunter's Potion is gone. No one bought it anyway. No one cares. Manamune gains 10 attack damage. And this is actually, I like this a lot, actually, because we already know Manamune is going to be bought every game by Ezreal. Of course it is. Of course it is. Ezreal's going to buy this every single game. Whatever. So it's a buff to Ezreal, but that's fine. He's a bit low win rate. It's not a big problem, whatever. What needs to happen is Manamune needs to be good enough for other champions to want to buy Manamune. Yeah, it's going to be even better on Ezreal, but it needs to be competitive on everyone else, right? It's like, yeah, Kleptomancy is the best on Ezreal. We know that. They can make it competitive that other champions might choose to pick it up, right? That's where you're trying to line things up. Like, yeah, we know Jinx is going to buy Hurricane. We know Hurricane is going to be bought on every Kalista. Like, it's mandatory on Kalista. Look, we get it. We know. Can Hurricane be in a good enough spot where it's worth buying on the other ones? That's what happens, right? So it's like, yep, cool. A buff to Hurricane is a buff to Kalista, a buff to Manamune is a buff to Ezreal. Let's get it somewhere that matters for everyone else. And so what this is assuming a fantasy world, which of course can't exist, where you stacked out Manamune all the way to Muramana at level 1. How much extra attack damage is Ezreal getting? Well, 9 to 6%. Of course, level 18, of course, he hasn't maxed out. But hey, you know, 169 becomes 179 attack damage. Okay. He gets that much attack damage out of it. For Jace, it's 9 to 5%. Jace actually has more attack damage growth than Ezreal has. So he does care less individually. Like, if you are playing Manamune Jace already, you are getting arguably comparably less buffs than Manamune Ezreal was getting. What you are getting, though, is an item that grants you a lot more attack damage, right? This is an item that already gave you 20 AD because of the 100 mana or 1,000 mana that it already had with 2% conversion. And it gives you roughly another 20 AD on your base mana because you scale to about 1,000 mana there. And now it gives you another 35 on top. So this is now an item that gives, instead of 65 total attack damage, it gives you 75 total attack damage, right? Because it was 25 on the item flat, 20 from the mana, 20 from your mana, then it landed. So, yeah, this seems pretty reasonable. This is now more likely to be an item that other champs are willing to build, which to me is a positive. We might start seeing Manamune picked up by champions like Jace and other AD casters. You know, think back to old Lethality Varus and stuff. You used to play tier Varus back in the day. This seems like a reasonable choice to make. I'm kind of glad this exists. Next up, VFX updates to Ashe, Caitlyn, Jax, and Renekton. That's pretty cool. Also a change to Aftershock. Everyone take a look at this one. Changes to Aftershock. Oh boy, this is massive. I know I have the page down button. I'm using my scroll wheel instead because I'm a bad person. Okay, bonus armor 70 to 120 based on level is instead a flat 70, but plus half your bonus armor and bonus MR. And the damage, 10 to 20, instead of having a health ratio and a bonus AD and AP ratio, is just a slightly buffed health ratio. So now, things like Aftershock Riven, they're already going to conquer, don't get me wrong, we knew that, but, you know, Aftershock Lux and Aftershock Riven and Aftershock Lissandra and things like that are now going to be less likely. It's going to be weaker. If you didn't buy, I don't know why this is WCD, don't ignore the fact that I didn't update the labels. You are getting a bit less armor and magic resist out of this ability. Now, this is not actually that substantial of a change. Not really, because 70 is still a lot in the early game, and in the mid to late game, honestly, it's still pretty meaningful. Like, I could have, for example, plugged in Lissandra's base stats and said, what's her durability overall? Again, something I could have done. Just didn't really have the time. I apologize for that. But it's going to matter. It's going to exist. You will feel a difference in the mid to late game. This will definitely have an impact. It's just not... It's not as big as this looks, right? You're not 58% less durable. That is not true. But of course, for tanks to use it well, they need 6 armor and MR, right? One for each stat to make it as good or better. And, you know, runes handle this for level 2, but, you know, up until you buy a cloth armor and stuff, like, at level 10, having like a Sunfire cape and a Negatron cloak, I mean, maybe. Like, that's probably about on curve, but until you buy, it's weaker, right? Like, okay, yeah, you're probably recalling at, you know, level 6-ish and buying, you know, a couple of cloth armors and a ruby crystal or something. Like, that's probably in there, but you're probably not getting both stats, right? So if you are playing like Aftershock, Nautilus top lane, then you built Ninja Tabby because of the Jax you're facing. You don't have MR for the magic damage on his kit or the, you know, Fiddlesticks jungle that's ganking you. So this is actually weaker on tanks for a fair bit of this time. And keep in mind that the Aftershock is actually capped as well. You can only get up to, right, like 20 bonus armor MR at level 1. But to be fair, that's fine. You're not going to reach that regardless. But if you're like stacking armor, you're reaching this cap anyway. So like you're not like further jumping into infinity. Which is fine. You don't need that to be the case. I'm just sort of explaining that it's there. The cap at, you know, plus 150 instead of plus 120 is still a buff. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, as far as late game tankiness is concerned, and as far as tankiness to your preferred element, it's going to get better once you start shopping. Absolutely true. Also worth pointing out that supports are not often able to buy a lot of armor and MR because they're often buying, like, upgraded Sightstone for like 2,000 gold. And okay, they might get Knight's Vow for 40 armor, but that only matters at like level 8. You're past level 8 when you finish Knight's Vow on support. Like, for sure. So you are weaker in a lot of these cases. Now, Leona's better because she's going to trigger W. As long as she presses W first to get the bonus stats, then she's fine. But for the rest of them, it's actually weaker in a lot of cases for supports. I'm going to assume this means more damage overall for tank users, but I'm pretty sure Aftershock is slightly weaker. And maybe that's on purpose. But yeah, it's definitely weaker on mages, but it's weaker in a lot of cases on tanks. So minor rune tuning, 5 to 10 health on bone plating. Celerity gives you a flat 1% move speed at the beginning, and then the rest of this is not quite as good, but that's fine. Some ideal users will be slightly weaker, but that's probably okay. Making this a little bit more general is, I think, a positive. Meaning somewhere in the middle of general versus specific is probably good. Cheap shot 2 to 5, conditioning an extra 1 armor MR. That's nice. That helps with the above, you know, Aftershock change, of course, because you get like 15 armor MR straight up, because it multiplies everything else you have. Demolish shows on the tooltip. That's nice. This is a really big thing. Ghost Poro actually seemed fine in a lot of cases. It didn't seem too weak, but it stacked so slowly. Oh my gosh. Your trinket had like a 3 or 4 minute cooldown. It took forever to get your Ghost Poros out, and that's if they never got swept. So I'm glad to see this buff because holy moly, this was a chore to level up. Boots come in slower but stack up faster. If you have 8 kills or assists, you make up for this. Good luck with that. So Boots getting nerfed is a good thing. Relentless Hunter buff is a good thing. I like that we're seeing more of these weak things getting buffed. 5 on Scorch seems nice. Ulti Hunter, this is like... Ulti Hunter is probably the most exciting rune to me in the runes that just isn't used. So now we got 25% on max stack. That's pretty sick. I'm glad all these things are getting buffed. This is great. I love this. So hooray. Hooray. Scuttle push to 315 is a pretty big change, though. Scuttle push to 315 is basically it's not just in this. It's saying, hey, you know, it felt really bad that junglers like had to be good at level 2 so that they could do like red Raptors into Scuttle or blue Gromp into Scuttle or whatever. And if you couldn't do that, you just lost map control. Also, you hope you have mid push or bot push. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you are. Like, it was such a tax on everyone to fight for 2-minute Scuttle. Now 315, like, fast junglers clear at 315. If you're really turbo farming, you've got that. So it's not slowing you down. And in fact, I want to point this out that Scuttle spawns at the average level of champions in the game, which means spawning when everyone's level 3 or 4 instead of level 1 or 2. means the scuttle is worth more gold into XP. It's actually a buff to golden experience overall because it's worth more. I think that's cool. And it means, yeah, like if you aren't able to clear all 6 camps by the time Scuttle spawns, at least you can plan your pathing around, oh no, I'm clearing on Volibear, I'm slightly slow. I'm going to do, Red Wolves Blue Gromp bot. And I'll take bot Scuttle at level 3. Like, that's fine. That seems reasonable. I think this will end up being a really positive experience for junglers. It'll be a positive experience for junglers to not have to get screwed so heavily by the time they're done vertical jungling or by the time they're clearing their part of their jungle. They're ready to go on either side of the map and fight for a scuttle without having to face a level disadvantage, without having to care as much about the first levels of your laners laning phases and if they got pushes or not. That seems positive. That's it for the patch. Thanks for watching. No TLDR, I'm sorry. There are a ton of reworks that are honestly too hard to TLDR. Okay, fine. Really quick one. Here we go. Aatrox needs to get a kill to revive on his ultimate. Blitzcrank, its passive is cooler. Recon is longer killed by mages and you can't flash during R, at least at the beginning of it. Soraka has to max Q and doesn't max E anymore. Tahm Kench is worse at saving teammates. His ult is now a lot weaker, but he does more damage, is a lot tankier. And then a lot of minor updates to other champions that make them weaker or stronger as needed. Yeah, sorry. I know it's really lackluster TLDR. It's probably not a great video. I apologize for that, but I just didn't have all the time to do all the prep I needed. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. MSI starts in by the time you watch this, 12 hours. Stay tuned. MSI is going to be awesome. Bye.